Okay, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. Happy Monday. Hope everyone had a good weekend. I had a very busy weekend. I'm sure it will come up in a video later on or something. Anyway, today I thought I'd do a video about the odd me. That's O.D.D me, although the other odd applies as well, I think. I've just written a few things down, and I'll try not to read too much, but I want to make sure I cover everything. So today, I've been thinking about for as long as I can remember, when I'm told to do something or told something in general, my mind has a tendency to go in the complete opposite direction, right? Or if nothing else, if it doesn't do that, I definitely have to know why. Like, why do we do things this way? Why is this right? Why is this, explain something to me. It just, it's just the way my brain has worked. Of course, I originally thought it was just my teenage brain. That's probably the first time I became aware of it. The adolescent brain that can be fairly rebellious. But it outlasted that by quite a bit. It's still, in fact, I think it's still going on quite strongly. And it was definitely part of my teaching. Um, I often taught my students to question everything, which I still believe, which I think is part of it. And even within teaching, I think, looking back now, that I often felt kind of alienated in my schools, partly because I didn't feel like I was doing what everyone else was doing. I certainly didn't feel at times like I was doing what my admin wanted me to do, but I did what I felt or what I saw was working. And that's why I continued. And I often joke, I may have already said this, that I think that's the only reason that I made it through my career. I had a few run ins, a number of run ins with my administration. Um, but because they knew that I was doing a good job and I had people who would tell them that, um, they didn't really, it didn't go beyond that. They just kind of left me alone. I ended up in the back room of the last school I was at, and I'm sure that was for a reason. But about 20 years into my teaching, I was at a lunch meeting and somebody brought up this idea of O.D.D. And I think it's maybe different now, but at the time it was explained to me as oppositional defiance disorder. And as soon as I heard that, I was like, that's me, right? That is the way my brain works. I'm not sure it made much difference knowing that there's a title, and I don't know if this is connected to the other things I talked about before, ADHD. Certainly, I can see how it may have contributed to my depression at times. Feeling that alienation, feeling like I was doing things wrong, right? Which, of course, I wasn't. Um, yeah, what I like about it is that now I feel like I can lean into it, right? I can lean into this doing things differently, right? Make my own path. And really that's even these videos. I know that I'm not supposed to make long videos and everything's supposed to be quick and to the point, and but I'm just going to ignore that because it's just not me. I'm going to kind of make my own way. And then because of that, of course, it means also that a lot of what I do stands out from the crowd, which I like. I don't I understand why people want to take photos of the same thing. I don't find it very interesting. I don't know why I would want to be a photographer and take photos like everybody else is taking. But our system, whether it's capitalism or what it is, I'm not sure, uh, seems to encourage that, right? That we all do the same thing. When I look at that, a lot of the most popular photographers, the people who get the most likes and whatever else, um, a lot of the photos are the same. You know what I mean? I seem to see the same photo of a mountain with water in front, something in the foreground, taken at dusk or at sunrise. Beautiful image. I'm not saying that they're not beautiful, but it's the same image over and over again. And for me, it just doesn't interest me. Um, and part of this brings me back to my schooling. Obviously, I was in the school system for a long time, both as a student and as a teacher. And although I have lots of issues with our current school system, I do give it a lot of credit for shaping me. I wasn't a great student. Again, maybe that was the O.D.D. I did enough to get my credits. Um, but if I was engaged in a class, I was 100% there, right? I love to have discussions. I love to talk about things. I was very engaged. And many of the stories, and we'll leave the whole idea of that everything's a story for another time, but that's something that I've read recently. But when I talk about the stories, mainly it was English classes that I was engaged in, which is, I think, what led me to becoming an English teacher. And the stories and the poems and the books that I read, have stuck with me. I've also taught some of them, which helped and reinforced them. And that brings me to what I want to do today. Today, I want to try something a little different. I am going to read one of my favorite poems, The Road Less Traveled by Robert Frost. And no, that's wrong. See, it's not The Road Less Traveled. I think it's The Road Not Taken. I always mix it up. Anyway, whichever it is, you'll find out in a second when I record it. I'm going to read it, and I'm going to try to find some photos that have been inspired by it, right? Because I think it has led to my photography. Of course, most people know the poem, but if you don't, well, you'll hear it in a second, and you can make your own judgment on it. It's interesting that, of course, it's often a lot of people quote it and say, it was the thing that changed my life. It's interesting. About 20 years in, as I was teaching the poem, I found a web page that argued that the poem is ironic, right? That Robert Frost actually didn't mean any of these things. That it was kind of a joke between him and his buddy that he used to walk with. And that's okay. When I taught it, I would also present this, and I think today, because I've recently started to understand that we need to think paradoxically as opposed to simplistically. I've over my life, if I went back through my Facebook feed, I don't know how many times I've said, "Well, here's another paradox. Here's another paradox." But I just read a book, one of these M. Scott Peck books, in which he talks about the importance of being able to hold paradoxes in your mind, because life really is a paradox. And maybe that's exactly it, right? Like you can appreciate the poem for both being inspirational and also maybe being a bit of a joke. And of course, the other thing that is important to me in the poem is that maybe it's not about which path he takes. Maybe it's about the fact that he actually chooses. All right, maybe that's the most important part. Anyway, hope you enjoy it. I won't come back on here, I don't think, after and say anything. I'll just recite the poem, show you some photos, and I will see you again in a few days. Thanks for watching. The Road Not Taken by Robert Frost. Two roads diverged in a yellow wood, and sorry I could not travel both and be one traveler. Long I stood, and looked down one as far as I could to where it bent in the undergrowth. Then took the other, as just as fair, and having perhaps the better claim, because it was grassy and wanted wear, though as for that the passing there had worn them really about the same. And both that morning equally lay in leaves no step had trodden black. Oh, I kept the first for another day. Yet, knowing how way leads on to way, I doubted if I should ever come back. I shall be telling this with a sigh, somewhere ages and ages hence. Two roads diverged in a wood, and I took the one less traveled by, and that has made all the difference.